Fire and Rescue Board. Stacy?
Recording in
if you
progress.
would-
Bob Bellin,
Here.
Tom Touchette,
Here.
Matt Grimmer.
Here.
Roger Yolo,
Here.
Martin Gloon,
Here.
Jeff Rumler,
Here.
Magdalene Miller. Here. Anthony Arbusius,
Here.
Al Tice, Jean Marinick,
Here.
Steve Getz,
Here.
Mark Moore,
Here.
Jerry Arlovsky,
Here.
Jim Morris.
Here. Okay, then if we could have, the fire commission by Mary.
Tom Marshall.
Marshall. Was on Zoom.
Yeah.
Tom Marshall, can you cue in that you're here? He's on Zoom. Well, continue on.
Gloria Knapzik. Here. Brad Scott,
Here.
Mary Altscheffel. Here. John Schrader,
Here.
Heidi Peterson,
Here.
Anthony Scrimmon,
Here.
Mike Dowd,
Here.
Fred Loomis,
Here.
Gary Fleischer,
Here.
Dennis Evinrude, Debbie White, Mike Burrell, and Steve Seibel are excused.
Okay, then if we could have the village of Shaniqua.
Joanne Vicencio here.
Rich Grumpy here. Bob Elman here. EJ Pubic here. Dan Newmer here. Village of Neshota.
Neil Gustafson here.
Clint Johnson here.
Mark Moore here.
David Evenstead here. City of Delafield.
Daniel
Turner here.
You could have your clerk call the roll. Sorry.
Alderperson Henry. Here. Alderperson Schaefer,
Here.
Alderperson Valdy. Here. Alderperson Wilkin.
Here.
Alderperson Grimmer.
Here.
Alderperson Price,
Here.
Alderperson Iker,
Here.
Mayor Atwell,
Present.
Administrator Hafner,
Here.
Attorney Sawyer Gutenkunst, present.
Village of Oconomowoc Lake.
Mike Bickler,
Here.
Derek Taylor,
Here.
Dave Zimmerman,
Here.
Paul Fisher.
Here. We also have two of our fire board members with us, Martin Gloon and Jeff Rumble. Town of Delafield.
Supervisor Miller,
Here.
Supervisor Wolfley,
Here.
Supervisor Michael.
Here.
Jeremy Kranick.
Present.
Supervisor Mahoney Ogden, said she'd be here, but is not here yet.
Village of Wales.
Gene Marnick here.
John Reinbold. And the town of Genesee. Buck Houston. Charlie Ross. And absent is Rick Braun and Sharon Lear, our town chairman. I do not believe is here. Chair also here, the town of Genesee representative. Your board member. Yeah, and I'm Jim Morris. I'm a board member also. Okay. Any public comments at this time?
Yeah, I'd like to be,
Please state your name.
yep. Kind of hard to see everybody. I'm Martin Morris. I'm sorry. Sure. Martin Morris, captain with Lake Country Fire Rescue. I'm also the representative, with the local 5241. I've been a Lake Country resident my entire life. Born and raised in Lake Country in the town of Delafield. I graduated Arrowhead High School, pursuing the fire career in my junior year which was through City of Delafield Fire Department. As I started going through with the POC, as a part-time, became a full-time firefighter paramedic in 2006. And then in 2007, I was promoted to captain. I'm also currently a rescue diver, also added as a Thames operator for the SWAT team. It's a skit. I'm here to express concern on behalf of the Lake Country Fire Rescue, local. Regarding the referendum that was passed by strong voter support in the city and town of Delafield, it is from my understanding, prior to the referendum, there was change to the language by one of the 7 communities. This was last minute change, which differs from what all the communities voted on. Is this true? This change will cause a hardship on the department as well as the community with future staffing plan. This will leave stations short-staffed and potentially browned out. The members of Lake Country Fire Rescue and Local 5241 are very concerned with these changes. It paints a picture that our fire board and communities are a split team, which is not the best interest for LCFR nor the community. We've seen and heard YouTube channels of council meetings that has made comments regarding a potential for no increase in staffing, possibly laying off. These sound bites have a significant impact on our morale. They also create issues with future candidates for being hired, which we're already seeing that. People look at this as a situation where we are having staffing problems and we are lacking in leadership. This behavior sends the message that the organization is not stable. Chief Fennig has worked tirelessly to make adjustments to the budget and has said and addressed all staffing concerns. He's continually getting pushback from the board to make those adjustments, which he has. LCFR and the Local 5241 show up every day, 24/7, 365, in a professional manner to serve the communities, putting our best foot forward, regardless of the negative tone that we hear and see. I ask you as a governing board the same, because in the past months, it appears as if the divide and the lack of professional leadership. Thank you.
Any other public comments?
Yes. Good evening, everyone. Todd Stecker, City of Delafield, 2312 Oakwood Road. Many of you I've spoken in front of before. Thank you for the time tonight to be able to speak in front of you. It's disturbing. It's disturbing to find out that we passed a referendum. We passed a referendum by over amount of public opinion that said we need to support our fire departments. We need to support our fire and rescue.
Would you
Okay.
please go back and stand behind there?
Okay. Why? Because public safety costs money. And when public safety costs money, we are communities that can afford to support public safety. We have all these people in this room because it means the dearest of all of them. To come to find out, we have dirty politics and backdoor bargaining going on. Is BS, okay? We can't stand for this. As City of Delafield residents, we need to stand up, okay? We need to support what we agreed to. I was raised, my word is my word, and it better happen. Guess what? From what I'm hearing, it's not happening. I tell you what, if it doesn't happen, one of you guys I will be running against. Not sure if it's a mayor or all of them, but we'll find out. This stuff can't go on. Let's make it happen. Thank you.
Any other public comments? Okay, at this time, I will turn it over to the chief. We have a ceremony of swearing in a new full-time firefighter paramedic.
My distinct pleasure. Vinny, come on up. So it's my distinct pleasure this evening to swear in Vincent Ardolini as the next full-time member of Lake Country Fire Rescue. I'll wait for him to come on up. So he's not walking around the maze. So first of all, I'd really like to thank some very important people to Vinny that are here with him tonight. His mom, Eileen, his dad, Frank, his stepmom, Jennifer, his boyfriend, Zach, and his cousin, Sean. Thank you to your family for supporting Vinny and supporting him when he's away from home for long stints of time so he can proudly serve these communities. Thank you for supporting him through all of his education. Vinny started with Lake Country Fire Rescue when he was a freshman in this building. He met Lake Country Fire Rescue and Chief Rennan at a workshop that Tanya was doing. And that's all part of our program in the ecosystem at Lake Country Fire Rescue that captures young students at Kettle Moraine High School and teaches them about the trade of firefighting and how amazing of a career this is and how rewarding it is to help people day in, day out. And the family that they have behind them with their brothers and sisters that come into work every day, put air packs on and run into burning buildings as other people are running out. So, you know, it's a distinct pleasure to be able to swear Vinny in tonight as the next member. So to your family, Vinny, thank you for supporting him. Okay, Vinny. Also, I should also note that, through his schooling, Vinny, has obtained his Fire One cert, his motor pump operator cert, his paramedic cert, and his instructor. Again, he came through the, program. He went through the EMT program his senior year of high school. He had a stint where he wanted to go be a nurse at Carroll. We won't hold that against him, but, as he worked at LCFR and really met the family and fell in love with the profession, we were able to convince him to go to paramedic and show him all the wonderful things that are in store for him. So after doing this 25 years, Vinny, I can tell you have great things to see ahead of you. So, if you would, please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I, Vincent Artolini,
I, Vincent Artolini,
having been appointed to the position of firefighter paramedic inspector,
having been appointed to the position of firefighter paramedic inspector,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
swear that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
the Constitution of the State of Wisconsin,
will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
and will faithfully and impartially discharge the duties of said office to the best of my ability.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
That ceremony is with any swearing in ceremony, the firefighter paramedic gets to choose who can come officially pin their badge on them. And Vinny has chosen his boyfriend Zach to come on up and take care of that. So Zach, come on up. Congratulations, buddy.
Thanks.
Okay, the next thing I have listed here is instructions, and I'm not sure what I'm supposed to instruct.
Introductions.
Oh, introduction. I thought it said. I think we're going to go with the fire board members all have signs in here. And most of the rest of the crowd is, firemen, so. I think we'll just bypass that, rather than just go around the room and say our name again. Everybody can pretty much see who's who.
Jim, excuse me,
Yes,
the city of Delafield is planning on going into closed session right now. And we would like to exit the room, have our closed session meeting, item 10 on your agenda as well as ours, and then come back and meet with the rest of the group.
you don't want to wait until we at least discuss some of the things that
So
are.
we'd like to go into closed session now, and we'll be back. Won't be too long.
If that's the case, you have a quorum and you can, then that's your prerogative. You have to take that vote and go on your own.
Yeah.
We will put this meeting into a recess until you return.
Great, appreciate the cooperation.
I'll make a motion to go in closed session.
Second. Okay, I see Thomas back in the room. We will reconvene. City, did you need the vote to come out of closed session or you did?
Already took care of, thank you.
Okay, we're going to start, continue on here. And what I want to do is, have discussion on items 7, 8, and 9. And we'll go through and just do discussion first. And then we'll come back and see if anyone wants a closed session after the discussion. Or if anyone wants to take action on them, because each of you, are in a separate meeting. So therefore you can act or you cannot act on it. The fire board has no say in this anymore. You're voting on the chief's budget and you're voting on an amendment to the IMA, which the fire board does not have a vote in. At this time, the first item for discussion would be an amendment to the IMA by each of the municipalities, and I'll quickly cut to the chase. You all have a packet, and in there is the first amendment to the intermunicipal agreement. The first page is pretty much boilerplate. The crux of the meat of the item is the exception for 2024. The municipalities agree for the calendar year 2024, the aforementioned restriction shall not apply. The sole purpose of this amendment is to increase the total budget amount for the year of 2024 above the previous restrictions. In 2025 and each year thereafter, any increases from the prior year shall be subject to the consumer price index plus 2% cap noted above, unless further amended pursuant to Article X of the agreement. And I would ask that in this discussion, that there be one principal from each municipality that speaks so that we can expedite this and not have everyone just talking. I think everyone should be appraised. You're sitting all together. So, discussion. Anyone have anything for discussion on this item?
Conemaugh Lake is ready to vote.
Okay,
Genesee has no objection to the IMA amendment.
Village of Wales has already voted in favor of the changes unanimously.
Village of Shaniko has no objection to the CPI plus 2%.
No objection from the town of Delafield on the exception for 24 for the CPI plus 2% exception.
Village of Neshoda has no objection. However, I would like to raise the issue of the fact that, for the next, budgets in the future, that we're looking at 2025 and 2026, we're looking at significant increases as well. Are we gonna be doing this dog and pony show again, for these next years? Because, you know, I don't see how the chief is gonna be able to do that. So while we agree with this, I think that, it is something we need to take into consideration right now as to how it's gonna be handled in the future.
okay, that is not, part of the action item out here, but I do hear what you're saying, and I would, as president of the board, I would implore the communities to get together and come to an agreement. And I don't care what road they take, but this cannot go on. So that's my point on that. Any other discussion on this item? Okay. At this point, the chief will give a brief.
Delafield has not spoken, I don't believe.
Yeah,
Pardon?
the city of Delafield hasn't spoken.
Okay, I asked if there was any discussion. Do you have any?
Okay, yes, I do. I
Okay,
figured you were gonna call us since we were last.
no, I wasn't calling.
City of Delafield, objects to voting in favor of that and would vote no.
Okay. So that covers everybody then? Okay, at this point then, without, and that's how you intend to vote on it?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, as a point of order, I would like the opportunity for our village to vote and be on the record.
Okay,
I think other municipalities that haven't voted yet should also be on the record. So I would ask, first, we're looking at item number 7, which is possible action on the amendment of the IMA by each of the municipalities. The copy was in your package. I believe that this is the same thing, a very similar document that we've already passed in the village. So I would ask for a motion and a second on consideration of
I'll stay with that.
okay, moved and seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Chairman.
would any other municipality that hasn't already approved this like to vote on it at this point?
Mr. Chairman, Town of Genesee, we have it on our agenda for Monday, but my board members would like to vote for it at this time. So, I would ask for a motion. We do have a quorum. I would ask for a motion to approve the amendment to the IMA. The motion been made and seconded. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Does that come?
Minnesota has already approved the amendment.
Uniqua is in favor of it. Have you voted yet on it? You have not voted. You just voiced to be in favor of it, right?
Oh. We approved it as a board, about 2 months ago.
Oh.
If you'd like, we can do it again here.
Well, I think it's,
Jody, this is a little bit different.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Okay. That's fine. All those in favor, wait, okay. Second. I have Rich making the motion and EJ is a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Based on that, we can do this again too. So do I have a motion to, amend the IMA? All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? It carries.
okay. So that makes, 6 communities that have voted for it.
Town of Delafield would like to take action on the IMA too. Just to clarify, all this IMA amendment is doing is providing for a vehicle to exceed the CPI +2 provision for 2024. And really that's so that we can retain the 7 hires that we did this year, so that we can exceed the budget. I would ask for the forum of the Town of Delafield board to make a motion.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I would motion, for the board to approve the First Amendment to the Lake Country Fire and Rescue Intermunicipal Support Agreement.
Second.
Motion is second to approve the IMA as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously, Town of Delafield.
Okay. Then the next thing we will have a discussion and a little short recap from that is on the capital budget.
Mr. Chairman, Jerry Fletcher has raised his hand to speak.
What's that?
Jerry Fletcher has raised his hand on Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me, hopefully. My question is, are we able to ask the city of Delafield why they have voted nay?
Well, I certainly think we can. If they want to give an explanation, that as long as we're all here.
Yeah, we're voting no, and we're anticipating having discussion as we move further through the agenda as to the reasons why.
Okay. That's your answer, Jerry?
But who was part of the original formula calculations out of all of the 7 communities?
To my knowledge, it would have been, yeah, cheap if you would.
Sure, Jerry, to answer your question, the formula that IMA 7 is using was derived by Tom Hafter, myself, and Dan Neumer from the Village of Shaniqua in a number of working meetings.
Okay.
The other 6 communities really are the new 4 simply asked for proposal, and this is what we gave them.
And did we have a consensus or an agreement, or how did we get to this point that we're at?
Great question.
My understanding after the referendum was this was a win-win for every single community. And to come back and have to reiterate this, it seems like a total waste of time and a total waste of our fire services.
I would like to thank Jerry for asking the question. I actually appreciate an answer as well.
Sure. Well, let's give a little history. And I'm grateful for the chief and everybody putting this together. I think it's important to recognize where the city came from. When we first began discussions on moving from IMA 3 to IMA 7, adding new members, there were certain advantages for the city. Some of those advantages were increased response time by adding the town to Delafield Station. Practically speaking, we did not save a whole lot on our operational budget. In order to bring new members in, those new members came in at, from our perspective, relatively reasonable rates from what they were paying currently. And by doing so, like I said, we gained, and for us, the city of Delafield, the thought was we gain on capital, we improve our response time on the east side of Lake Nag, and we pay roughly the same in terms of operations. And this is all pre-COVID. This is all pre-staffing crisis. We were all made aware that paid on call was a problem, but it was never the problem to the extent that it was that the pandemic caused. So now the city is facing a year and a half later, after we sign IMA 7, we are faced with a crisis in staffing that has been made worse by the pandemic. And instead of facing X budget and X operation costs, now we're faced with almost 3 times that. And so the agreement that we made to initially bring on additional members is now, because of the staffing plan, is obviously a significant increase for the city of Delafield. And that's kind of, at least that's my perspective on where we came from and how we got here. And so given the current circumstances, that's where the city is looking to look at the IMA, look at the funding formula, to get more, in our perspective, and I know that's probably not yours, but to get more fairness out of those operations.
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that, so going back to 2010, I was a relatively new council member, and when the Lake Country Fire and Rescue was being assembled, I know Mr. Bellin was a key part of that, and I did my best to be a fly on the wall in a couple of the iterations of the multiple spreadsheets over months that they tinkered with formulas to make win-wins for every member. And it wasn't a formula that was, hey, this is going to work forever. But this appealed to the 3 members at the time of the founding of LCFR. And there was a lot of contemplation and coordination and discussion about how to carefully craft that formula so that everyone felt and was paying proportionate to what their demographics were, their economic situation was, their geography, their utilization, all of those things. And that seemed to work very well for us for a long time. And then in 2020, when we went into negotiations with the new members,
that formula was revisited under those same types of ideals in my understanding, and that was the consideration of the three different factors. The fixed rate piece of the formula, which lowers the barrier of entry for new members by disproportionately assigning costs to the existing three members. By the variable portion, which is based on the demographic, the population, the valuation of the land, as well as the utilization. And then the third part of the formula is the cap, which gave a maximum amount that could be impacted by any one community from one year to the next. And during the 2020 negotiations, I can't believe that anybody in this room contemplated that the chief would be presenting us with a budget that would triple the operational cost asked from over the course of just 3 or 4 years. Had that been on the table as a potential end game just 2 years ago, it was not a win-win. It should not have occurred. We need to revisit. When you're asking in this section 7, the way it's being received by me, at least in the city, to change the formula in the IMA, you're looking at a very specific singular part of that formula and not taking into consideration the balance and the impact of the rest of it. And today's circumstances need to be taken into consideration. It's like they were in 2020 and back in 2010, the last 2 times the IMA formula was updated. That's what some of our discussion was about. And, eliminating the cap to enable the 2 communities that passed referendums to contribute that $800,000 plus toward the $1.7 million ask of the increase that Chief Fennig is asking for is palatable, given the ability and cooperation for us to collaborate and look at the entire formula, not just one piece of it.
But as a whole, everything in city government has gone up from payroll to healthcare to retirement to everything else. So I don't think that this is something that's new to municipalities, especially after or pre-COVID and then after COVID. So I really don't see why there is such a big shock to, if it is actually tripling of the budget or your portion of the budget, why that would surprise anybody.
Well, everything has gone up, but everything hasn't tripled.
Everybody's paying more though, city of Delafield.
Are you paying
we're
3
paying
times as much
we're
as
paying
you
a-
did for a loaf of bread?
Yeah, but just from the town of Delafield perspective, we started this thing in 2020. We were paying $651. In 24, it's 100% increase from where it is when we got into this thing. And everybody's paying, just as much as the increase. And the formula is the formula. And Mr. Hafter's blueprints are all over the formula that's in the IMA that everybody agreed to and signed. And now, we want to throw out the fixed portion of the formula and use the variable portion of the formula, which makes the city go down to 38% and everybody else has to pay more. That's not the deal we signed on to. And at the end of the day, we have a staffing crisis in our fire department. We have a really good thing with Lake Country Fire and Rescue. We had public comment before this meeting that I don't want to see long-term damage created with Lake Country Fire and Rescue. And we need to figure out a path forward. And we need to figure out a path forward for 24. And then we need to figure out a path forward for 25 and 26. Because we all got to figure out how to work together.
I absolutely agree. We have to find a way forward to work together.
You realize by not accepting the amendment to the IMA for next year, that we would revert to last year's budget. That's the only authority we would have. Last year's, am I correct on that, John?
No.
The chief has the
You could still approve CPI plus 2% increase, obviously. Yeah, that's correct. So, yes, CPI, but we'd have to go back to the other budget because none of us would have the authority due to the fact that one of us didn't vote to amend the IMA. So we would have to revert to the budget that was 2023. How much money is that, Chief? Do you know?
John, actually, do you have them? I have to dig down into this computer right now that's running. Zoom.
Well, you told me the maximum allowed under the agreement without an amendment was $3,480,975.
That seems correct.
So not only would we not have as much to spend as we spent this year, we'd have to go backwards.
That, if we did not approve this amendment,
That's correct.
yes. And we're not suggesting that we're suggesting, a more, revisiting the IMA, the funding program, and getting to, an appropriate level of funding.
Well,
But aren't we all under the same funding formula? I mean, it applies equally to each community. Isn't that correct? Or is that not correct? Somebody shaking her head back there.
It does and it doesn't. So if you want to.
Well, it does it or doesn't it? I'm asking a simple question.
Well, the impact and.
I'm not talking impact. I'm talking about, is the formula apply equally to each community? So we all pay the same, we have the same agreement as far, now, your population may increase, the number of runs may change. All those are factors taken into consideration. But the formula applies equally to each community. The numbers are gonna change, obviously.
If you, in any referendum language.
I'm not talking referendum, I'm talking about.
Can I please finish, or when you're done speaking, nod and I'll talk.
Okay, go ahead, but I'm questioning what you're saying is referendum. We're not talking referendum. We're talking about the funding formula that we get to arrange for the money to spend to operate the department. And that's not a referendum fact, that's our agreement. Go ahead.
I'm trying to provide context in the fact that when referendums are presented to the people that are paying the bills, it's very, very typical to put down the impact of a homeowner that owns a $500,000 house, let's say. Okay, so if you're saying that this budget change has an equal impact on that fixed income couple in the $500,000 house in the city of Delafield as it does in the town of Delafield, I will say it does not. The impact is significantly higher when you look at the formula as it exists. Once you remove the cap, the impact on that single homeowner who was likely, could be on a fixed income, $100 impact to the town of Delafield resident could very well be a $210 impact to the city of Delafield resident. And that is where I say, if on a spreadsheet, it looks fine. When you're asking people to write the checks, it's alarming. And we're looking for, taking both of those two things into consideration, tweaking one aspect of a 3 variable formula and expecting equitable results when the numbers are changing so dramatically, is not logical. We're looking to make an alteration to the formula in its entirety, not just one piece of it.
Well, speaking on behalf of the town of Delafield, and when I came to your meeting in July, so the town of Delafield cannot change the formula for 24. The town of Delafield, when we went to referendum in April for the city levy for the 14 firefighters, did it based on the formula in the IMA that we agreed to in 2020. And again, are we talking about equity or equality? Are we talking about if I live in the town of Delafield or the city of Delafield, we shall pay the same amount for fire service, even though the makeup of our communities are very, very different? I mean, the city's got a lot of commercial, it's got a lot of senior living, it's got a totally different makeup than what the town does. And there's no way that we can talk about changing the formula tonight for 24.
Well, that's what number 7 does.
Number seven
eliminates a piece of the formula.
All number 7 does is remove the CPI +2 cap so that you can retain the 7 firefighters, which you ask your residents to do in your referendum. And that passed by 70% of your community.
So let's do it.
And I would also say that, and I wasn't in the room in 2020 when all of this was talked about, but what I do think I know is that the referendum that was passed would have exceeded 2%. And now we're turning that down in the city of Delafield and putting all 7 of our communities in jeopardy because we're not approving CPI +2. Is that correct? Because I wasn't here.
It's a fair question.
What two communities have done is asked taxpayers permission and got their authority to increase the levy by somewhere in the neighborhood of $470,000 in the town of Delafield and somewhere in the neighborhood of $450,000 in the city of Delafield. We're prepared to spend that extra money. But it doesn't, the formula doesn't work when you just change the cap. We have to figure out a way to leverage that $800,000 worth of spending capacity. That's half of the budget increase that the chief was looking for. That leaves another 800 plus-ish for the other 5 communities to find. And we'll be whole. I mean, we'll pass the budget that he has on the table.
In all due respect, you didn't answer the question.
Well, you can't just change, you can't accomplish what I just said, by just eliminating the cap. We need to, work with the formula like we did in 2010 and like we did in 2020.
Changing the rules in the middle of the game, when there's a change in ownership of this, right? Like we've gone and asked our taxpayers to increase what they're paying, and they agreed to it. So do you. They agreed to it, and now it's like, okay, well, we're not gonna actually make this change until we also adjust this thing over here, right? Like, talking about change to the entire agreement is.
Oh, I'm sorry, how you're
getting, well, hold on.
Agenda item number 7 alters the formula.
Okay.
We're suggesting that that's a good start. We need to talk about altering the formula.
Okay, so but if you, in the meantime, then we need to agree on it and not hold 6 other communities hostage for it and potentially 7 other jobs at risk for it. Right? So if we agree on this piece and then can come back to revisit and find out where we get to that. If there's gonna be a change, right? Like, fine, we can talk about the change, but in the meantime, like, what is supposed to happen with the budget while we're figuring out what's gonna change with the rest
So
of the
you
agreement?
would be agreeable to a funding formula change?
I didn't say that. I didn't say that. But what we committed to our taxpayers, right, was an increase in spending to get this done. Right?
Why do you
In this
think this is
fashion.
a funding formula change? I mean, we're just changing the cap.
The cap is a key part of the formula.
The cap is a key part of the agreements. I would argue that we basically,
The city would have never entered into this agreement without the cap.
neither would have.
Then I, it,
Last year,
oh, wow.
when we spent all the extra money we had,
We didn't change the cap.
we didn't change the cap, but we set the trajectory. The cap would have to be changed or 7 firefighters would have to be laid off. So in my mind, what we're doing now is right sizing the ship from the decision that was made last year, where we agreed to spend some excess money while still maintaining the terms of the IMA. But now we need to alter the IMA so that we can retain those firefighters.
We agree 100% that we went into the referendum with the exact same intent. Let's
So
change the
can we-
IMA to retain the 7 firefighters.
Yeah, can we do that?
That's the intent.
That's what we wanna do.
That's what 7 says.
But is 7 going to continue year after year after year? Is this just a Band-Aid that's gonna take care of 23 or 24, and then we're gonna be talking about this again?
That is the city's concern, Jerry.
Well, I think people need to understand, and if you've ever worked, and all respect to everybody on this call, if you've ever worked in a city organization, if you've ever worked in a fire department, a police department, it's not a revenue generating organization. It's a revenue draining organization. And as calls for service go up, the price of service is going to go up. And that's something that you can't do that on the cheap. You can't. And if you want to go back to the old days where we had paid on calls and volunteers, all you're going to get out of that is excess response times. You're going to get lack of training. You're not going to get the professionalism that we currently have in our 7 communities. It's a fact. You cannot argue that. And if you want to argue that, then I would say move somewhere else. But this is something that is critical to all 7 of our communities. And it's something that I think everybody in their true of hearts says, yep, we need to pay for it. It's not going to ever become a profit center for anybody in these organizations.
And Jerry, we understand the vast majority of what you're saying there. I think what we need help from you is to understand that this is a dramatic change. It's not a typical change because of inflation and some oddities. This is a significant change. And we're here to work out an agreement to spend all the money that we've raised in the referendum and accomplish that goal.
I would, and I'm sure everybody in this meeting would agree with that, but it almost sounds like we're arguing over pennies. We're stepping over dollars to pick up cents. What is the deficit that we're talking about from the 22 budget to the 23 to the 24 budget? How many, what's the number?
Gary, can you ask that question again? I'm sorry.
What are we talking about? Are we talking about 100,000? Are we talking about 200? Are we talking about 500,000? What are we talking?
In terms of what the city raised in their referendum and what the board approved plan is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Just shy of $300,000.
Okay. So $300,000. And that is the 300,000. Is that what we're lacking from all 7 communities, 5 of the communities, or is that just one community?
Just the city.
So what's the population in Delafield right now?
I can get that for you.
7144.
What's 300,000 divided by 7144?
I don't understand this.
I don't know either. The city did this math when they went to referendum. They figured it out. I don't know, guys. Is there any common ground we can do to pass the 24 budget? I mean, the IMA has a contractual end date. I believe it's in 2025 after 5 years. If you would like to discuss a funding formula change, I believe the appropriate time is when the agreement ends. And we can set a course to do so when the agreement ends. But changing it in the middle, the benefit of the city to the detriment of the town of Delafield residents, if that's something they're interested in. Is there any path where we can have a 2024 budget that keeps our type of fire? I'm open to ideas. I understand your position on it.
I think that's an excellent idea. Excellent idea.
But by eliminating the cap is an essential part of the formula.
Yeah,
I understand.
Well, we're modifying the cap for 1 year to accept the increase that we put into place last year. We spent our reserves, we spent our extra capital money to get ourselves out of a crisis. And we did so sort of skirting the 2% plus CPI because there was available funds within the fire department. So to maintain our progress and keep those people, we would need this exception in the cap to right size where the budget's at.
Is the town of Delafield committed to spending the full amount of the referendum that passed?
Yes.
And so is the city. By eliminating this, we can't.
But the city did the referendum deliberately for less than what was called for in the budget.
That's not the question I asked.
But you were disingenuous when you went to your voters and asked for the wrong amount of money based on the budget that the entire fire board put forward last year.
Both communities with the referendums asked the taxpayers for money based on the anticipation that the formula would change.
Oh, no.
Well, what is number 7? You're
It's not a
eliminating.
formula change, it's a cap.
Okay, let's keep it a little civil here and one at a time, please.
Tim, to answer your question, the town is willing to spend the amount that the formula allows them to, based on an agreed upon budget. If that budget is to use all 470, we will. If it's a lesser amount, we'll use our portion and use whatever amount of that referendum.
And how can you do that without changing the formula?
We'll be changing the cap as to how much the budget goes in. I asked, is there a path? You guys see one? Is there a way we can get to a number in a structure that allows us to just move forward, keeping the 7 firefighters for the next year?
I think you follow the funding through 24. That gives the city officials the opportunity. It gives everybody a year to, if you have to sell this to your constituents or your residents, whatever. I think most people agree, and most people would understand that the cost of fire service and police services is going up, and it's a part of life. And I think to not give the chief what he needs to operate his budget and operate his department for the next year going forward, or the next 18 months is, that's not acceptable.
I think the state of Wisconsin and the legislature did recognize the fact that there was a crisis. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe in our last meeting, Mr. Hafner, did you say you were getting an additional 400,000 in state aid for first responders?
No.
What was it? What are you getting?
In state share revenue?
No, not in state share. The additional amount that the state earmarked for first responders. Each community is getting more than what they had originally anticipated.
I'm not familiar that we get any money from the state specific to first responders.
Like this year revenue.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, but they increased it because of the shortfall that was necessary because of first responders.
I believe the city got.
Karen, you're on,
Yeah,
the board for that you worked with
That
the
was-
legislature.
that was the idea, that most legislators actually have, is that they expected people would be using that money for fire and EMS, which had been a major, talking point at the state level.
Anyways, if you're talking about the state share revenue, I think it's about 180,000 additional that the city will be receiving, above and beyond what we received in the past.
We'd like to take your number that you're willing to commit, our number, and then we'd like to work together to talk about changing all 3 of the variables in the formula to come up with a budget that we can approve for this year.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor, that's just a tough spot. I mean, we're not gonna agree to have the town of Delafield residents pay more after they just passed a referendum.
What you're willing to commit this year, what we're willing to commit this year,
No formula change.
and
Semantic.
discuss a formula change for 2025.
I just interject, we had a referendum language that was specific to retaining 7 and hiring 7, so if we use all of that, then we have to produce that.
Yeah, so, Mr. Mayor, you're saying that we would set our goal to rediscuss the funding formula at the end of the current IMA in 2025. Is that your statement?
I'm saying that we're asking for a commitment from each of the other 6 communities to work with the third-party group, independent group, to come up with a more equitable formula and work out an agreement to get us through this year. But we want your commitment to be willing to look at all 3 aspects of the formula, which includes the cap and the other 2 items,
Mr. Mayor, we
look for equity amongst all the communities.
I think the village could consider what you're talking about, but one of the things I would want agreement from all the communities on is instead of having a 5-year commitment with a 2-year out, I want a 1-year out. Okay, if you're gonna modify the IMA, I want everybody to have the ability to get out in 1 year, and you could do the same in Delafield and say, we're done.
Mike, I appreciate the comment, and it's something we'd be willing to consider. But we have to have this type of conversation
Okay.
to try to move
But we
forward.
also have to move forward on 24, and you know as well as I do that if we hired a professional, brought them in, tried to get a meeting like this put together and adjust the IMA, that's not gonna happen by 2024. That's not gonna happen by every municipality's budget time.
Not by
We're starting to plan
2024, by
budgets now.
2025,
Pardon me?
by 2025.
That's correct.
Yeah.
But if you would agree to pay in 2024 what was budgeted last year for 2024, I think everyone here should agree to looking at the IMA with a professional, as you suggest. But I don't believe we get there in 2024 without the chief's 4554 budget. Okay, and that requires an amendment to the IMA. If you continue, you haven't taken your vote publicly yet. And I understand that. You've told us what you think the outcome of your vote's gonna be on number 7, which is the amendment to the IMA. The first amendment that we're talking about. If that doesn't pass tonight, we go back to last year's budget because it's an impasse. Everybody can talk about, I'm willing to pay more, I'm willing to pay more. Unless everybody agrees to the budget that we have to follow, we've got an agreement we gotta follow. So we're going backwards. The chief's gonna have to give out pink slips. Because City of Delafield won't even agree to adjust to keep the budget the same as it is this year.
But Mike, I think he's offering a path forward,
Trying.
Mr. Mayor. I think he's suggesting that he will get to the number. We haven't said what number yet.
We'll get to the number that our citizens passed in the referendum.
No,
And
that's
is
not what I'm asking for.
Is that the retained number or the add 7 number?
Tom can tell you the number.
I'm looking to fund the budget of 54554.
The thing that we talked about the last time, some of us were in the room, talking about all of this, was that at 1.5 million, which is what you had said, it leaves it not funded completely, and it fundamentally changes the formula. He said, I can only speak for Neshota, and I can't even speak for Neshota without everybody else here sitting next to me. But what I can tell you is that everyone kind of said, we are willing to look at the formula moving forward. We are not willing to look at the formula today because we don't have time.
I think that Mayor Atwell's proposal is fair. The only thing that I would say is that I would ask to have that extended through calendar year 25.
Steve, that's your. About in our meeting that we had at the town of Delafield, maybe 2 weeks ago, that if we didn't have to take a look at opening up the IMA for various aspects that the city would like to see amended, that we would put a time frame on it of 6 months, we would have to make a decision. And we would start in earnest now, and we would have to have a decision by March as to what was gonna happen beyond 2024. I believe, we need to fund the chief's budget of $4,554,000 for 24. And then we also need that commitment that we all get together, we work with a professional, and we fund the fire department to the chief's budget for next year, so that we're all not suffering the brownouts that we have now. We'll still perhaps have some brownouts, but it'll be significantly less. And that's fair to every community, including the city of Delafield. We can't get this done before budget time this year, which is 8 weeks away. It's just not gonna happen. We can't get a professional to come in that fast and talk to us and everything else. And then we need 6 months to get that done.
Well, again, I stand by what I say, end of 25.
Yeah, I think the town would agree, numbers aside, because I think we have a discussion there, but the town would agree. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I think we would be in favor of looking for something, studying something to take effect for the end. That's when the IMA initial term's up, and that's what I've been saying, that would be the appropriate time to look at it. So if that's what you're saying, then they would be willing to do that.
Steve, I think the initial term is up after 2027.
It's a 5-year term.
2-year out.
2-year out.
So the initial term is 5 years and then somebody can get a policy.
Can I just correct you? I do believe it's 5-year term that started on January 1st of 2021.
I'm agreeing with the meeting. Why would you interrupt them?
I think for all of the communities to move forward, and especially for Chief Fennig to hire qualified, competent professionals, we can't have this looming over our heads or over the fire department or the agencies that are involved in this, because as you heard earlier from Captain Morris, the social media posts are brutal, and it's hard enough to find qualified people, yet alone trying to find qualified people when you've got social media posting negative things about your agency. So I think the longer we can give Chief Fennig the opportunity to build his organization, the better off it's going to be for every single one of the communities that are involved in this.
Are there any other comments from the other municipalities as to our proposal?
We'll agree to look at it. What number do you have in mind for 24? As far as the budget number?
Operating budget, not.
Okay.
Looking for the LFP? The one that we talked about in the 1.5. So it'd be approximately 1.59 million city contribution.
Which is the total budget of how much? Adding everybody in.
3.38 million. 3.85.
3.86 only.
I think that's a number that allows you to retain your current operation. Is that correct?
Correct. The question I've been asking on top of that, and I haven't gotten a clear answer, is in 2023, we budgeted for 7 new hires to be hired January 1st at lateral transfer pay rates. My understanding is those hires took place over a series of months, some of them not happening until just recently, and that the majority of them were at the low end of the pay scale and not the lateral transfer rates that we had budgeted. And so my thought is that it seems like there's, and I don't know this for a fact, but it seems like there should be a few $100,000 of cost savings this year. Couldn't those be used on top of the 3.86 million to get us somewhere up into, I don't know, the 4.1 million type of range? And I would look to the chief for thoughts on what that number might be. If I don't know if you've got that quantified at all, or
I don't want to take a swag at a meeting like this, sorry.
This is not a number we can start looking into until early 2024.
This would be the 24.
But you would speculate, per Tom's rationale, that such money
Should exist.
should exist.
Is that, I'm sorry if I don't, are you looking at me and asking?
I'm looking at you.
Oh, sorry. Yes, I think that there is, I'm targeting a 4.1 area with what Tom just mentioned. I would just like to ask, what's the rationale for not following the plan that everyone agreed to?
Well, our recollection, Chief, is that, we were given a presentation by you of what the plan would be, but we are at a loss to find any kind of record of us approving the budget that you proposed. Our understanding is that we have listened to the proposal and we've gave feedback at the time, but there's been no formal vote or approval by the city of Delafield on your plan.
So I can say that 3 times the board has voted on the plan. Your 2 constituents on the board have voted unanimously for the plan on November 10th. Everyone was presented with the costs that were associated with the plan. Matt and Roger voted yes for that plan, including the costs. It is in the meeting minutes.
Chief,
all
I
due
would
respect-
clarify on that vote was to push that proposal to the municipalities, it wasn't an endorsement of a 4-year spending plan. We don't vote on 4-year spending plans in the budget. And during that meeting, as everyone on the fire board knows, I attempted to enact some more conservative budget measures, including removal of an HR, removal of a drone, removal of building furnishings, but there was no agreement from the fire board. And given that current situation, yes, I voted to push that proposal to the municipality, but it was not it's not a vote. We don't vote on 4-year budgets. But I
agree with Matt, I was in the room, I voted for it to push it to the municipalities. The town of Delafield did not pass a referendum that met the terms of the 4-year projection. Our discussions around it were, quite extensive, and we just didn't think that projecting anything in the fire world at this time out 4 years was reasonable. So our referendum does not cover a 4-year plan. And I agree with the city on this. We have to take each budget on its own. We want to allocate resources to the best that we can. I think the fire board's recommendation to the municipalities carries a lot of weight, but ultimately it's the municipality's job to tax our residents and raise those funds, and that's just a different responsibility than the fire board has. And so there's a distinction and a difference that I point out at every one of these meetings, and I'll continue to have to, that I as a supervisor, I can't treat the 4-year fire board plan as gospel. We have to take it one step at a time. It appears the step before us today is a maximum of a $4.1 million budget that has some sort of agreement to work on a plan for the end of 25, where we may be able to change or alter the funding formula moving forward. If anybody sees it other than that, please speak up, but that seems to be the maximum of the common ground here.
When you say
Well, I
4.1,
I'm sorry.
just a quick comment. When you say 4.1, you're assuming the addition of a couple $100,000 of cost savings. for this
Correct,
year.
that was the number Chief just gave us.
And one thing that I would say, because, Mr. Mayor, you asked if there were any comments based upon, the offer of 1.5 million. The problem that does for me is that rounds out, your station a lot. And when it does that, it drastically affects the communities on the north side. And so we'd have to talk about what that's paying for. And so then let's just say we're like, hey, we need to open up the Neshota Fire Station to service the communities on the north. Well, then the town of Delafield is, are they browned out? It starts to talk about all sorts of questions that we don't know the answers to yet. So if you wanted comment on offering 1.5 million and not funding it completely, that would be my comment.
Thanks for sharing that. It's a good comment, and, we would ask the chief to make the best decisions he can to maximize the coverage based on all the facilities that he has, and use them and his personnel as wisely as he possibly can.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Chief, can I ask that when we were here, was it last fall, whenever it was, the last time we sort of sat around here?
January.
Before the referendums went to vote, did you not put on the board there what the budgets were gonna be? I believe it was 4-point-something million.
Correct, yes.
Those were put up there, and I do remember that sitting across the way was the city of Delafield saying, not a word, but yes, we're gonna pass this referendum and we're gonna get the funding. Now, that's my recollection of it. And I wanna know what changed. And also, you made a comment regarding value of housing valuations. So are you telling me that housing valuations are being considered in you're just a flat fee, right?
No,
That's
housing,
what you passed, correct? Or is it valued that
Equalized
the
by-
million, is it equalized or is it? If I'm in a $50,000 house versus $1 million house, I'm paying more. Is that fee
We're paying the
change?
same.
It's the same. Then why are you talking about equalization and bringing this
I
up?
think when they talked about that, they were talking about the existing funding formula. That's a component of it.
To answer one of the first things you said about recollection of last year, we were sitting over there and the exact, scenario that played out is one of the questions that I had for the chief. And that was, how realistic were the expectations that he was gonna have 7 fully tenured, 90% married with kids firefighters starting on January 1st, 2023, because that's the budget number we were looking at. So that number that was being presented was called into question at that time, as being on the high end. And so how that was actually going to realize itself over the course of the year during the execution was yet to be determined. And there was other things that Alderman Kramer mentioned about other items in the budget that you mentioned, other facets that you brought into question as well. But I don't know if they were produced or not. But, there was talk and critique of the budget by the city of Delafield and our participants last year. But we were not sitting there silent, nodding our heads saying no problem.
I haven't heard any objection to your proposal about agreeing to look at this for sometime in 25. Does that change your stance? You're an objection, does that change your stance on the IMA and what's in front of us?
We want the caveat that we agree to independent third party review of all aspects of the formula to be part of that motion.
Sure, and nobody's objected to that, I mean,
But I think good faith would be shown though, if they pass the IMA and they figure out how to, get 24 figured out, so we're not all sitting here staring awkwardly at each other. I mean, this is just,
Our goal is to do both at one time.
there's a short game and there's an end game. And ultimately, the short game is, in order to even approve a $4.1 million budget, we gotta approve this IMA.
we can't even approve a 3.9 if.
And you guys have been holding this hostage, and it's getting a little ridiculous.
With
And
the
then we gotta
motion
figure
to
out
amend the
24.
IMA, we just want to add the wording, also everybody voting affirmatively to also include this third party analysis.
If we do
And
that,
then we'll vote on the budget separate.
the other communities are deciding to change the formula this year.
No, go ahead.
I mean, because we've chosen not to fund the chief's budget. And so either we suffer the consequences of that, whatever exactly they are. We suffer those consequences or we come up with more money somehow. And that consequently to get to the chief's budget. And that changes the formula fundamentally. If we can agree on keeping the formula, approving the budget, even if it, if we can go back and tweak another, $50,000 out of it, fine. But we can't hold everybody hostage over the fact that we all knew what the idea of the budget was. So to say that we didn't is not true. And we knew what it was, we knew what our figure was, and you're coming in with a figure much lower than.
And don't we have the right to do that?
I'm not an attorney.
I think the answer is clearly yes.
I mean, I think we should, if we can get away to pass the IMA amendment, then we've at least set the baseline that we don't have to lay off firefighters, right? Because we can then get to a 3.9 or 4.1, whatever the final number is, budget, right? We would have a path to get there. Because in the moment,
Significant accomplishment.
that's a big win. Like, at the moment, we have no way of keeping the people we just hired. So like, if we can bridge that gap, then at least we're retaining the operation as it is. And Mr. Chair, I mean, we could even see a scenario where if we could get the IMA done, we could let the fire board do their work again and let them come up with whatever that final number is at their next meeting. Because then they would have an authorized IMA to exceed the CPI plus 2%. And they can figure out that number for 2024. And it's not the perfect number that the chief asked for, or certainly the number that you're talking about from Minnesota, but it prevents us from having layoffs. And I would see that as some sort of a marginal victory where we can path forward and let the fire board continue to do their work. Does anybody disagree with that?
I think we're past the point.
How do you, work that with the referendum that you passed, indicating to your constituents that you were gonna do a 7 and 7 thing?
Yeah, I mean, we agreed to retain 7 and then we agreed to hire 7 and,
So how do you pay less than that?
My quick answer, Mike, is that we wouldn't have to charge them the full amount of room referendum, right? We had an up to amount. So if the number comes in somewhere other than that, then we've accomplished part of the referendum without using the full dollar amount.
But doesn't that violate the public trust?
The public trust is not laying off. So that's where I'm at.
I agree, but the public trust also is hiring more.
Yeah, and I think
And
it
that's
sounds
what
like
they
we're setting a
said.
path forward to 2025 where we would be able to accomplish that in some way. Frankly, I mean, the city of Delafield, aside from the formula thing, I would imagine some of their position is that there's a dollar amount in their referendum. And if the dollar amount on that referendum is different than the dollar amount that residents receive on their tax bill, that would be a big problem for you all. Like, however you got there is been debated for a very long time, but I don't see them putting a higher number on the tax bill. Just because that's the number that residents voted for. Am I off base on that, guys?
Yeah, not to exceed $450 per house.
Now, they also have in the referendum that number can go up in future years. So, if that number were to go up in 2025, then we would be making progress towards our goals. It may not be as quick as everybody wants, but we would set a new baseline and then we would be able to make progress towards the goal.
And Mike, to answer your question, if we use, let's say, half, or we increase it, or whatever we do, the subsequent year, if they increase their fee, or if we agree to some type of something, we can use the levy cap, and we increase up to that 470,000. They'll give the funds.
The town also has a unique position where we do not budget for, we don't borrow for our capital. So that's another consideration that they'll just have to take into account as far as the referendum.
Well, talking about amendments, adjustments for hiring a professional, everything else, I still think that I'd like to see the $4,554,000 budget. Okay. That is number one, what you told your constituents with your referendum you were going to support. And number two, that's what every community here, with the exception of the city of Delafield, is willing to support. So
That's correct.
So if I think if we're willing to support X and city of Delafield wants us to support Y, that's how you come together. We want what we want, they want what they want. We'll agree to what they want if they agree to what we want. I think that's just simple. And it fulfills what you promised in your referendum to your constituents you were gonna do.
Yeah, I'm with you, Mike, and that's a fine position to take. It's just not a position that has us leaving this room with a 2024 budget. So I don't know.
Well,
how much longer we want to
browbeat each other. Would you agree to what I just said? What community here wouldn't agree except the city of Delafield?
Your question of the city is what? Do you want them to pay the full 4.5 to hire?
I want to use the 4.554 which is what was known for a long time, it's actually less than what was anticipated. Okay, and I'm saying then we bring in the professional, we open the IMA, we have a 6-month time frame to get that work done, so that all the heavy lifting we have to be committed to by all the communities. We can't drag it out and then not agree to anything, because we'll again be in a position of hurting the fire department.
I would like to put that to a motion for the group.
I'd second it.
What exactly is that motion?
Yeah,
Sharon, I'm sorry, you can't do that.
Yeah.
As much as I don't disagree with you, but.
Unfortunately, each municipality has to vote.
Each municipality has to do the motion on their own.
Yeah.
Well,
give the city of Delafield 5 minutes to go into closed session and agree to the full amount of the budget, and we'll all agree to looking at a new formula for 25. Isn't that pretty simple? You wasted an hour of our time in closed session already. Take 5 more minutes and agree to this.
Or even open session.
according to the IMA, we now have the chief's budget in front of us because the fire board did not pass the budget as they were expected to do because the vote didn't pass. So now we have to make a decision. We go with the chief's budget. If we don't go with the chief's budget, very possibly we lose 7 people and we don't hire any extra for next year. We're not here to argue about anything but how we're gonna support our fire department. And these people work hard for us all year. And you dial 911, you expect them to show up. And this is a terrible show by the city of Delafield as to their support for the fire department. You all should be ashamed of yourself. I'm sorry. But there are 6 communities that are supporting our fire department and for what they do for us all year round. We love these people. And what is this going to show to every community in this county? If you cannot vote for a budget to keep the people you have and to hire some more for next year, so that when you call somebody in your home needs a firefighter, EMT, a paramedic to show up, you want them to show up, but you're gonna sit here and you're gonna argue about this budget. You all should, I just can't even believe it. As far as I'm concerned, every community here except Delafield accepts this $4.5 million budget. And my community, my board is ready to vote for it. As a matter of fact, all 6 communities have except you. Now, if you want to be the standout and you want to show that you do not support the fire department, that is up to you. But I think this meeting should be over.
Sharon, we do support the fire department.
Then show with your
No,
vote.
just,
Hold
no,
it.
I'm
Hold the
done
phone
with
here.
that. I'm done with it.
Why can't we, is the city of Delafield willing to go into closed session to consider paying the amount shown in the budget now? And then propose for the rest of us to agree to restudying the formula after 24. Are you willing to do that? Otherwise, we might as well go home. Are you willing to go into closed session to consider the amount shown in the budget? And then agree to restudying the formula for the future? Are you willing to go into closed session to do that? 5 minutes. Yes or no?
We're here to have a discussion.
We're having it. We've had it.
We're here.
We're
We've
here.
had the
It's up to
discussion.
you to now
It's your
decide
decision.
if you're willing to go with that.
It's your decision.
I think you've heard that we support your idea of opening the IMA. Okay,
We don't know why, but we're supporting it.
but we're supporting it and we're also, I'm trying to put a finite amount of time on it so that we all have an answer for 20. And I'm saying, you give us 24 budget that the chief submitted, we'll support your idea of hiring a professional and bringing them in to look at the IMA in earnest. And we'll all commit to working hard to get it done by the end of March. And we'll start right away, as soon as we can hire that professional. And I think that that's ultimately what your goal was to get the IMA opened up. Our goal, the 6 other communities that are supporting the fire department, their goal is to follow the plan that was voted on last year. Okay, and it was reiterated and voted on again by the fire board this year. It's in the minutes of the meeting from July, I believe, if I'm correct, chief, is that right?
We're not,
June.
we're not going anywhere. Can we get the city of Delafield to at least consider
we
agreeing
had
to the
the-
budget number for this year?
We've had that discussion,
Have it again.
and we've been sitting here for a number of, almost an hour, I haven't watched the clock, having this discussion about how we're trying to find a compromise that we can find agreement on.
It is a
And that's one
compromise.
that doesn't meet our
It
criteria.
is a compromise. We're asking for you to agree to the budget for this year, and the compromise is we're agreeing to study the formula going forward. That is a compromise. Why don't you consider it in closed session? Please?
And we talked about that before.
I believe you've got every community here right where you want them, more or less. Okay, opening up the IMA. Fully opening up the IMA. The only thing we ask is that we support the chief and the fire department. And any other vote that doesn't support the chief and the fire department, I think we're all wasting our time here. Because there's 6 communities that want to do that and are prepared to do that. And there's one that isn't. And the one that isn't, their main goal is to open the IMA. And you've got the other 6 to agree. You got what you came for. I mean,
We're not doing it
that's not
tonight.
happening.
That is not happening.
Not enough runway to open it up tonight. We can't open it up until 25 or beyond. I mean, the town went to referendum under the rules that were laid out in the IMA in 2020 that everybody agreed to. And you guys, when you guys went to referendum, changed the rules. You threw out that fixed portion. That was, you know, that was derelict in duty, and that was irresponsible by the way that you did that.
keeps being brought up. I'm curious where you get that, from.
Get what?
Going up a fixed portion.
Go back and watch the YouTube meeting from January when Tom laid out the different scenarios to go to the referendum. The one formula was to throw the entire fixed portion and go the 100%, the equalized value, population and cost.
We had 5 different scenarios. And the discussion, we had A through E. I mean, you go back and look, you're telling me to look at the meeting. You can go look at the meeting. And the discussion was how much money above and beyond the taxing that's already being done. We think, in light of what went on in Western Lakes the year before, how horribly that failed, we pushed the envelope to as much money as we thought we could get passed from our constituents, and it passed. And that's where what our number is. We have a not to exceed number that's on the table.
So you bring up the fear of what happened at Western Lakes. Is that your reason for the stalemate?
I wasn't afraid of, we're not afraid of Western. I'm saying that was a real life scenario about how the public reacted to ask for more money above and beyond what they'd been asked for before. And we did something pragmatic as far as what we felt was our highest chances of getting as much from our tax base as we could.
Okay, so what exactly is your 100% pushback on this? Is it the IMA? Is it the percentage? Give me one fact that is your pushback.
Jerry, we've explained what our proposal is. We are willing to give all the money that our citizens approved in the referendum.
And you know what, Kent? They're handing you, the other 6 communities are handing you a golden popsicle, and you guys aren't taking it. So they've offered to open up the IMA. All they want to do is fund this through 24, which I think is completely reasonable. And you guys are pushing back on that. Why?
Anybody else make a motion or anything?
To go in closed session to discuss the.
See you in a little bit.
What?
5 minutes. You can do it in 5 minutes, guys.
We're gonna go here or there.
Yeah.
Henry.
Okay, we'll reconvene the meeting. As you might notice, some of the communities have adjourned and.
Can you speak up? It's hard to hear you all the way down here.
Okay, I said, we'll reconvene the meeting, and as you can see, a couple of the communities have recessed or adjourned, I mean, and left, so. We'll listen to further discussion then from the city and the ones that are left here.
Okay, so we went into closed session, we had a discussion, and we want to continue down the lines of negotiation where we thought we had a realistically very close agreement between the town of Delafield, spokesperson and ourselves. So we want to work down that path, and we're not interested in working down the path that was proposed by Mr. Bickler.
Give me your path and dollars.
So yeah, that would be a LCFR budget of $3.857 million plus any cost savings from the 2023 hiring.
No, I want what you are willing to pay.
$1,591,875.
For operating and then plus capital or no?
That's just operating.
All right.
Well, there's no change on what they do.
No, we didn't, no, but at least it clarifies
We know what
what they're trying to achieve. All right, so you're unwilling to go with the numbers that are on the printed sheet, which is the 1,000,008 plus for operations plus capital. You're unwilling to do that, is that correct?
We said what we were willing to do.
What, and that's 1,000,000.
That's correct.
All right, why don't we go home?
Let's go. We're going to pass then. I'm leaving.
Cool, just round out their stations and go.
I'm leaving.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Do I have a motion to adjourn from the fire board?
I think that motion.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.